First order of business is approval of minutes from the May 16, 2023 meeting. And a motion to approve. In a second, Preston. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. And motion carries. We have two public hearings tonight. Just a quick poll. Who is here for the Grace Community Baptist Church hearing? Okay, that's most of the people. I think Lisa and I talked earlier. We're going to swap them on the agenda. That one will take longer, so we're going to go on and get a few people out of here as quick as we can. It's in New Vista. Is that you folks? Okay, we'll get you out of here if you're okay going first. Okay, first we'll hear New Vista Real Estate Holdings LLC has applied for a variance to waive the screening requirements for vehicular use areas for the western and southern property lines and to reduce the average width of the perimeter landscaping by 2.5 feet on the eastern property line on a 0.98 acre parcel of land known as 3998 South Danville Bypass in Danville. The property is zoned highway business. The way we'll do both hearings tonight is we'll hear the staff report, we'll hear testimony from the applicant. If there are any questions by the board for staff or the applicant, then I'll ask if anyone's here to speak in support of the applicant. Then if anyone is here to speak in opposition of the applicant, if there is, then we'll give the applicant opportunity for rebuttal. Then we'll close the public portion of the meeting and the board will deliberate and make a decision. So on our first hearing, the New Vista Real Estate Holdings, Michaela, I'll turn it over to you.
Yep. And I won't speak too long because the applicant did prepare a presentation, so I didn't add too many additional slides. But the property is zoned highway business. It has frontage on a private access road that serves 8 properties. The private road serves as a frontage road that parallels the bypass. The applicant is requesting a variance to waive the screening requirements for vehicular use areas. And here we go. For this western property line, the landscape buffer area on this eastern property line, and then the frontage, the screening requirements along this frontage here. This is an infill style development project. This parking area is existing. The 2 buildings are existing. They're proposing a small addition in the middle here and then a vestibule. This is an existing drive along this western property line that goes right up to the property line. And then it has a chain link fence. Let me see if I can find it right there. So you can see the drive goes all the way up to the property line, and then there's a chain link fence. There's also some elevation drop there. There is some existing vegetation on the eastern property line. The issue with the eastern property line that they're asking a variance for is we require an average of 10 feet of landscape buffer. The rear part of that property meets the 10 feet exactly. The front part is an average about 7.5, so they're slightly below that 10-foot average that we're asking for. My biggest concern comes with this variance along the front here, and it's primarily to do with how this property is laid out. It has access along this private frontage road, like I mentioned, but since this time that the aerial was taken, this property's been developed. It's Peevler Moving and Storage. They've built a connector between this private frontage road and this Southtown Drive, which is a city road. So this portion is also going to be a city road. So we now have a frontage road that parallels the bypass that goes all the way down to Danville Manor. And the way that the existing parking lays is that there's 11 spaces, 10, maybe 10 spaces along this front here that the property line actually cuts through most of them, aside from these back 3 And they would back out right on to this private frontage road that I think is going to see increased traffic. So it's really, for me, it's a safety concern. So that's my primary concern with these variances. I think they have justification for waiver of this screening requirement with just the elevation change, as well as just the way the lot is laid out and how it's existing. It would be very difficult to reduce the width of this drive. They can't reduce it to meet standards, so it completely cut off that rear parking area. And like I said, there's already existing vegetation here. It's just a slight modification to the average of the landscape buffer. But if you look at all the other sites on that area, there's not much in the way of landscaping for all these properties that are served on this frontage road. And this property did receive planning commission approval back in '99. The front portion had already been built, so planning commission approved this back area and this rear parking as well as this drive. But those are the three variances they're asking for. Like I said, I do think that the ones along the western and eastern property line have justification. My concern comes with that frontage. If you look at each of the other properties here, they all have adequate area to turn around before they get onto that frontage road. All of the stripes for the parking areas, it's only showing striping along this front here. So this is the only one that you're looking at, aside from these kind of parking areas that are carved out along the frontage road that have adequate maneuvering area for cars to be able to pull out safely onto that frontage road. So are there any questions for me?
I don't guess so. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys for listening.
And next, we'll hear from the applicant. And if you would, at the podium, please state your name and your address and promise that your testimony will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge.
And you can take the clicker if you want to run
Okay,
the
that'd be great.
presentation. Sorry.
Name is Chris Brown with Bowman out of Louisville, Kentucky. The address is 3001 Taylor Springs Drive, Louisville, Kentucky 40220. And I'm here on behalf of New Vista. And I do promise to tell the
thank you.
truth. Yeah, the usual. Yeah, so as Michaela said, this property is the 3998 South Danville bypass. It's zoned highway business here. And then this is the site aerial that was shown earlier, so you can see the access to and from the property. And this kind of gives that existing corridor view, so you can see where all of the properties are built out to that access road, and in a similar manner as our existing conditions. This shows the frontage view, so you can see the parking area in question here, this property line, and then the retaining wall and fencing along there. And that retaining wall is there. You can see the extreme grade change between the two, so it goes right up to that wall. This shows that frontage road, so you can see the existing conditions all the way down it with pavement up to it. And then this is a view looking back towards the site, so you can see there's similar existing conditions along all of these properties in terms of retaining wall built out to the frontage road, and kind of that similar style to what the existing conditions of our property are. So on our property, as she had stated, the site came before the Planning Commission in '99 for the approval of this back area and the access point that comes along here. The building additions are this addition here that's 806 square feet. It's a connector between the two. That 210 square foot front entry, it puts it at a total with the existing and the building additions at 11,216 square feet. The existing buildings, the two between them have 10,200 square feet. We've got 54 parking spaces along it. So there, along this front, there's 9 total spaces. And then You've got the dumpster area back here, so those are being neutral striped out, and then neutral striped here for the ADA and some additional ADA in that area for the use itself. That total of 54 parking spaces, it's 9 spaces, roughly, yeah, 8 or 9 spaces above the minimum. 45 spaces are required at 250 square feet based on the calculations I'd done. And so that's why we were requesting these to remain and the parking to remain on site to meet our minimum requirements and the minimum needs of the property and use itself. And then the existing landscapings to be preserved here and then along here that were shown in the previous photos. This shows the landscape plan and gives you a better idea of that landscaping that's being preserved in those areas. And then you can see some new landscaping being proposed along the building frontage. And this kind of shows the variance 1, which is that western property perimeter, and the access drive where there's that retaining wall at the perimeter. And then variance 2, which is the front southern property perimeter landscape buffer, and how we were putting that as parking needed for the use, even though it does front up on that frontage road. It has been in place since the construction of the building and been in that same condition since the approval before that, as well as the approval in 1999. And as I was showing on other properties, there's a similar condition of pavement out to the frontage road on those other properties itself. And then the eastern property perimeter, that variance 3, is where those existing plantings and then some additional where able will be put into place. Any questions? I can go back to the site plan in case you do. Uh-huh.
It's, yes, I believe it's a private access easement. There's not a true maintenance agreement in place. It just seems that there's some language in the deed that lays it out as such. We did find one plat that showed it as dedicated public right-of-way, but based on conversations with the city engineer and whatnot, I think it's always functioned as a private access easement. The primary reason being that some of those additional parking areas that you kind of saw come off the frontage road, I don't think the property owners are interested in losing those. So I don't know what the future of the street will be. I think it would be good to see it as a city road, but right now it's a private. Yep. If it was turned into public right of way, I'm assuming some of them would have to go away, the ones that don't the ones that are coming out into the road, but I can't say for certain. That'd be conversations with the city and the owner probably. What's that?
Put a little curve around it, I guess.
Yep. Yeah.
How many parking places do you propose to have?
So these are all existing parking spaces, so after everything that's done on here and any striping for the dumpster, it comes into 54 parking spaces.
Yep.
And you said you were required to have 45?
Yes.
So you could lose 9 and still be in compliance?
Yeah, we would be at the minimum.
Can you go back to the slide that shows all the parking?
This one?
The overlay, view. There you go.
Yeah. So you have parking row here, parking row here. This is a partial parking row, so it's not fully all the way down striped, but it's from this portion back. And then you have these rows in the rear. And you have 4 ADA spaces here, and then dumpster with neutral zones right there.
What is the hash marks signify here?
It's a neutral zone.
Okay, so it's not parking, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or are you counting that as 6?
They have 9. I misspoke and said 10. I counted those last 2 on the end, but they're not striped, so they have 9 striped spaces up front.
So are we looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Or are we starting here?
You start right, trying to get to it right there.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Here?
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9?
Correct.
Okay. Is this not suitable for parking?
It's not striped and hasn't been, and I'm guessing it's because this area is closest to the actual intersection and entrance, so those must have never been striped.
Can you go back to the picture so we can see that area?
It'd be pretty blind.
Yeah, and when you're actually out on the site, you don't quite see it like the plan because there's that jog in the actual property line. So, when you're out there, it looks like this would be the property line, but it takes this kind of turn right there. So when you're on the site, it looks like that's all a straight line property line. And as Michaela was stating, in the deed that we had on file for this was just kind of described as private access or access open.
So by my count, that private access easement would serve 8 properties. But like I said, that connector, that connection that Peevler built in, it's now going to run all the way down to Danville Manor, so.
Who is that deeded to?
That was just with their
It was-
property deed.
It was just our property deed
Yeah,
that had that.
but we don't have a plat that shows any type of access agreement, anything. I mean, I don't know that we have any additional information beyond, it's probably 3 sentences long that basically says this lot is served by a private access road.
And I had our surveyor look into it too, and that's all they found as well.
Who owns the property on the other side of the access road?
That would all be right-of-way for the bypass. Yep. So I think the right-of-way, my assumption would be probably starts on the other side of that private access easement, but I can't say for certain. That'd be my assumption, though.
Yeah, when you look at the photos, it shows, the roadway here. There's also this pavement area that's been there. It looks like, based on the condition of it, it looks like it's been there for a long time.
How many parking spaces do you believe you need at a minimum?
Matt Simpson. I'm the Corporate Director of Facilities and Safety for New Vista. We're the community mental health partner for Central Kentucky, and we serve Boyle County. We have approximately 15 to 20 staff that work out of our Danville location, and then when you factor in patients that come in through the day, we can potentially use all the space we can get. So we'd like to maximize as many spaces as possible. As far as a bare minimum, it's hard to say just because based on days and scheduling, it varies throughout the day. But potentially, if we had that many spaces, we could use that many spaces.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the applicant or staff?
George, if the access road, if the Peevler property has now completed that, it seems reasonable to expect more traffic.
Yeah, that road isn't officially completed, just to be clear, the connector road, kind of that connection that I'm talking about, but it's expected to be done shortly. It's under construction, it's not quite finished yet,
And-
but we
and-
have a bond for it, it's going to be finished.
Will it be a public right-of-way?
Yes, that will be where the city street ends, public right-of-way ends. Is that, yeah, kind of,
That point.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's reasonable to expect more traffic.
I think that's my concern with it. I think I would have a lot less safety concerns if it was going to be staying as is, just serving those 8 properties. But now that you're looking at it running along the whole of the bypass as it is, that's my concern, but.
Any more questions for the applicant? None? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here to speak in support of the applicant? Anyone to speak in opposition of the applicant? Hearing none, we will close the public portion of the hearing for the board to deliberate. Yeah, there's 3, so. Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about the variances one at a time? Okay. Could you put the slide back up that shows the 3 different variances? Okay. Start with 1. I don't see a problem with that. Do we need to vote on these one at a time, I'm guessing? Let's do that. Sarah,
I'll approve. Variance number 1.
motion and a second to approve variance number 1. Any discussion? All in favor? And motion carries unanimously. So variance 1 is granted. Variance 2 is the parking. So I kind of think without those non-spaces, they're still in compliance with 45 spaces.
I'm kind of willing to go with 3 of the spaces, but not all 9 of them. I think the 6 on the left should go away, and I think the 3 potentially could stay.
Would it be feasible to add 2 more where there aren't any and move the vegetation line back?
You know, the only thing that I think would work here is if you did 2 parking spaces parked this way and parallel parking there. Would that kind of get you a couple more parking spaces and kind of bridge the gap?
That's where you might put a blind spot.
Yeah, but even if you got, people are gonna park where they park.
Yeah.
If they redo the area and they stripe it, then it's going to help to some degree. People tend to
Parking the lines?
park in lines, I mean, but, I mean, just trying to
Yeah.
help them out. These three are, I think are in the clear. I think these six are, especially if this is gonna become a public access road.
So that would reduce the 6 to 2, so then they're only losing 4
spaces.
as opposed to 6. Or 9. I'm live with that.
You guys find that? You think that would work for you?
Yeah, so we would be keeping the 3 on the eastern side
Right.
and then parallel on the western side. I think we can make
With
that work.
Two spots.
Mhm.
Did you have something to say, Chris?
It's just open blacktop, I'm afraid. If they're just gonna park wherever they park.
Are you guys gonna stripe it?
Yeah, and as part of the redevelopment, it has to be restriped because there's going to be new lights. You can kind of see those little dots at the kind of corner where the 4 parking spaces come together. There's going to be new lights put in
Are you
within
looking
the
up
parking
here?
lot. So kind of where the 4 parking spaces meet, they're going to have to be restriped because new lights are going in, and, you know, neutral zone's going to be restriped to kind of show the path for pedestrians out of the park, out of their cars into the building itself. So there'll have to be new striping all throughout that front. And if you go out on site, you can see a lot of the striping's faded and older, so it'll need to be restriped.
I make a motion that we pass variance 2 for 5 parking spots on the condition that it's striped.
It's an approval of the variance, right? Because we're still waiving the landscape buffer. It's just conditioned upon revising the site plan to what you've just
Yeah,
described.
because I'm focusing on the parking, but the reality is they're supposed to have a 10-foot landscape buffer here
Oh, yeah.
with trees and shrubs and whatnot. So if you're allowing them to keep those parking areas, I would say you're granting that waiver, that variance. Even if you're asking them to restripe, we would still be granting, like Henry said. What,
It's all blacktop in the front. I'm okay with that.
Are they intending to put parking bumpers to encourage people to go the right way?
I don't know that you can. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
the way that you pull into these spots is gonna be from the frontage road, you'll pull in and then you can back out either way. I don't know that, I mean, unless you wanna prevent them from driving all the way through the lot, then you could ask for parking bumpers along here, but,
The only thing with the parking bumpers, if they went along that, just to use the example of the ones along the frontage, is then it would push the car more towards the frontage road because there would have to be space for the new wheel stop and such.
and I'm less concerned about the circulation on the site, to be perfectly honest. I think they're gonna have enough cars in that lot as it is, unless you're one of the first people there, that is probably gonna take care of itself, but,
You know, but backing out of a parking place into the roadway, it's no different than doing a 3-point turn, you know, on any other road. Or it's no different than a municipality that has diagonal parking. You know, you're pulling in from the traffic flow and backing back into.
Tear all that blacktop up,
Yeah,
plant shrubbery.
but you can, well,
I really think that's justified. I mean, if it's done, why would you do that?
So, is your motion made?
Yeah, I would update my motion to say that we approve variance 2 for 5 parking spots only and waive the landscaping on condition of striping the lot. I don't think that we need buffers or concrete barriers. So I'm not considering that part of my motion.
It's a motion, is there a second? Motion is second.
Let me just jump in here because I want to make sure we get this right, not to belabor. It's to grant the requested variance, waiving the landscape buffer, conditioned upon an amendment to the site plan,
Yes.
leaving the 3 easternmost spots and turning the 6 westernmost spots into 2 parallel spots.
Yeah, so this application is actually going to planning commission next week. So I don't know if it's appropriate if we're gonna waive the screening for the site plan just to be reviewed by planning commission and they can make that determination on the striping, or if we want to do that condition. Does that make sense, Henry? Can they put that condition on it?
I think that they can put that condition on. Your question is, can we tie the planning commission's hands to a different design?
Yep.
Ma'am, do you have a concern with it? I mean,
What's that?
do you have a concern? I mean,
I don't know if, I think we're still leaving the spaces here as they are. So I don't know if switching this area to parallel is gonna help. I don't know if it would be much safer than as it is now. I think, if we're gonna leave it all as pavement, I'm fine with them leaving it as is. But I guess, are you just thinking that when they're parked parallel, they would have
could you
hopefully a
explain that?
better
Could you
view?
explain that? I'm not.
So I guess I'm trying to understand, you're looking at parallel parking areas for this area here, and then we would leave these 3 spaces as is.
That's fine.
So I guess it's the idea that with the parallel here, they would hopefully have a better view.
Well, they wouldn't cross the property line either.
Yeah, they'd be.
Okay.
Within their property.
Okay.
So do you feel like the 2 parallel need to be taken out?
I'm fine with that. So it's the intent of just trying to get all their parking on their site rather than having those lines cross. Okay, I understand
That's
that. That
what's
makes
in my
sense to me.
mind.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's not a matter of egress, it's just a matter of parking on their property,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I'm concerned. And parallel parking off of a road shouldn't be a problem. Yeah. Do it on Main Street.
Okay, so
Now.
we're clear on the amendment, or the
Yes.
motion?
Yes, and I think we ought to just also nod that we're adopting staff analysis and the findings submitted by the applicant in support of these variances.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah.
All in favor of the motion? Aye. So that's unanimous. And,
Mr. Chair, who was the second on that motion?
Mike,
Thank you.
Thank you.
variance 3. And
That's to reduce the landscape buffer area from an average of 10 feet to an average of 7.5 feet. So the vegetation is existing, they're meeting that screening requirement, they're just reducing the landscape buffer by 2.5 feet.
Is that how it is right now, reduced?
Yes, yep, that's how, it basically would just remain as is. I think with these 3 variances, you're essentially allowing the lot to remain as is with the additional 1,000 square feet that they're looking to add.
You want this one?
I move approval of the 3rd.
pardon,
I move that we approve the 3rd variance.
based on the staff findings and,
Yes, based on the staff findings and the applicant's assertions of.
I'll second that.
there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? And it carries unanimously, so variance 3 is also granted.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Okay, our next hearing is Grace Community Baptist Church through Anthony Roy has applied for a conditional use permit for the construction and operation of a church on a 7.020 acre parcel of land known as 4680 Lexington Road in Danville. The parcel is zoned agricultural. So we will follow the same plan as before and begin with the staff report.
All right. I've grabbed the wrong staff report. Okay, the applicant is requesting to build a 2,400 square foot church building with 35 parking spaces, which meets our requirements as far as parking is concerned. They are proposing a new entrance onto Lexington Road, so they would have their own private entrance. This lot was subdivided through Planning Commission in the last several months. You can see there was an ingress-egress easement that used to serve this entire farm. This lot is now being proposed to be served by this new entrance. This entrance has been approved by KYTC as a commercial entrance. And like I said, the parking would meet our requirements. They're proposing 130 seats. That would require 33 spaces. They're proposing 35. I don't have too much to add. I just want to remind you all that conditional use permits are non-transferable, so you would be granting it to this specific applicant of the Grace Community Baptist Church. If they were looking to expand at all, they would have to come back before the board, et cetera, et cetera. So you are looking at this proposed use as shown here. Is there any questions for me on this? Okay. I did just want to clarify, there has been a lot of confusion about where this lot is located. I used the coordinates from KYTC where the entrance was approved, and this is where it's shown. So this is Old Bridge Road here. This is Chenault Bridge, and so this is where the proposed entrance would go, and I think the lot goes something like that.
Okay.
There's significant change in elevation on the property, isn't there?
There is a bit of an elevation change. I did include it's kind of hard to see this, but this was included with the encroachment permit application that was submitted to KYTC. So you can see they're going to have to do a bit of grading work to get that entrance through that area to bring it back on the property. But like I said, it was approved. They posted a bond with the state, so it'd be built to commercial standards.
Is the applicant here? If you'll state your name and address and promise that your testimony will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge.
I'm Will Stevens. I'm with Vantage Engineering, 2038 Danville Road, Harrodsburg, Kentucky, 40330. And I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Grace Community Baptist Church, and I do promise to tell the truth. I won't belabor what she's already described, but I think that the biggest hurdle has been cleared in that we do have an approved commercial entrance from the Highway Department. Its location is in part due to the topography that you mentioned. It's the best, gives us the best chance to have a smooth grade up to the site pad. It's also the furthest that we can get it from Old Bridge entrance, so there's no conflict with their left turn lane. We've got the best sight distance possible at that location. So I think that was of great importance. We will be served by water main on Chenault Bridge Road. There's an existing water easement that's continuous from that water main to our site. It'll be about 2,000 feet of water line, but we'll be working with the city on that to ensure everything's up to standard. The plan that you see there is very preliminary. If we're approved tonight, we'll of course submit a full site development plan to planning and zoning. where we'll flesh out things like stormwater detention and maybe some tweaks to the layout that you see there. We will certainly comply with the minimum parking spaces, but may add a few based on their current attendance. And we may reconfigure the parking lot to make it easier for them to possibly expand if they desire to in the future with their building. That's pretty much all I've got to tell you all, but any questions you all have, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions?
Thank you all.
Okay, is there anyone here to speak in support of the applicant? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the applicant? Okay. Based on the number of people here, let's try to keep your testimony to about 3 minutes or less and try to avoid overlap as best as possible. So whoever wants to go first, state your name and address and promise that your testimony will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge.
Hi, my name is Catherine Coleman. I live at 10 Kings Mill Road, and I promise to tell the truth. I can't tell you that I'm for this. I can't tell you that I'm against this. I have concerns. First concern is I want to make sure my understanding of the conditional use permit is that if this is approved, it's approved for only this size building, only these number of parking spaces. Is that right?
That's my understanding. And you said you might reconfigure the parking lot, but no more, no less spaces, correct?
Yeah, my understanding is that the layout that you see there is pretty prohibitive to possibly expand the building. We understand that any further changes would require an additional permit because we're not zoned correctly. We're asking for the conditional use. So
Okay.
if there are changes in the future, then they'll be brought forth to you all again so that you have another chance to review. But we're minimally compliant with the parking standards right now, but this is a preliminary plan, so I'm saying that there could be potential changes, and if there are, we would certainly bring them before you. We wouldn't be able to change unless we ask for permission.
Without speaking for the board, I think if we do grant it, it will be for that.
For what we have.
Nothing more, right.
So at this point, we are not discussing septic plans, water retention basins, or anything like that, right? That's the next step? Is that right?
That would be the planning.
Yeah, with the size of this proposal, this is going to be an administrative review. It's under 10,000 square feet. So they would go through a zoning permit process where they would have to submit the site plan, submit stormwater, drainage, all that information to us, and then it would go through our process of making sure it meets all our regulations. When a conditional use like this is approved, it's approved to commercial standards, so they basically have to meet our commercial requirements as far as parking, landscaping, everything like that. So we're not talking specifics as far as septic, water line, drainage, things like that. We're looking at the use, and when you're looking at the use, you're thinking about traffic, you're thinking about the number of people that are going to be on site, things like that. If the use is approved, then at that point, we would progress to the site plan stage of things.
Okay.
Yep.
Very interested in the site plan because of the water runoff. This curved area right here is a sinkhole. Thank you. We don't know where it goes, right? Don't know where it goes. It could wash away property that's on the other side of the sinkhole. There are houses there, all along Chenault Bridge Road. So the devil's in the details, and I'm very interested in, if you were to do more parking, do you have an idea where it might be?
It would depend on whether the future plans are. It would be near where the current parking is.
So, I mean, if they were to want to expand parking, are you thinking in terms of along the driveway, between the driveway and 34? And then removing that parking, so if the building were to expand, it would go that way?
Yeah, the building wouldn't go closer to 34, it would go further.
It would go further back, right. So that would, I mean, I'm just hypothetical. That would be logical to me. Okay, and how are neighbors notified for water runoff and the more detailed planning? Because I was not notified of this other than by a neighbor saying, hey, do you know about?
You wouldn't be notified for the zoning permit. We have no notification requirements for that because it's not going through the planning commission. It wouldn't go through a public hearing, so it'd be an administrative review.
Does that administrative review include water studies, as far as water runoff studies, and how it would affect those on lower grades?
No, they would just have to show that the potential runoff from their parking area is being handled on site.
Appropriately.
Yeah.
Okay, I would say that that's not enough. I currently get flooding in my driveway when it rains, 2 to 4 inches, when we just have a gully washer. I have a gully that comes down. Well, it's not going to be shown on this. It was shown on another one, on another plat. But my house is directly across from the old Chenault Bridge that is now closed. So in between myself and my neighbor is a gully that comes straight down, and it floods out my driveway if we have a really bad rain. If we have wrong runoff, or not planned runoff, and that scares me, just having a checkbox, then we're gonna have some problems. I'm gonna have some problems. The neighbors will have problems because it's open sewage, if you wanna call it that. Not sewage, but open water drainage, we'll call it that, going into the lake. So I would, if there's any way possible for notification, I would highly recommend that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Please.
My name is James Montier. I reside at 153 Old Bridge Road, Danville, needless to say. The property that I own
And you
is,
promise that your testimony will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay. The property that I own does not have an address because it does not have a mailbox. But it is known as, by the utility companies, as One Farm Old Bridge Road. Most of you will recognize it as the property that has the Go Big Blue barn on it, okay? That is the property, my property goes from 34 the whole way to Chenault Bridge Road. Okay. So that's where I'm coming from. My concern on this is that there is a provisional road in that comes down a private road, okay, which goes into the property owned by Alex Milburn, and the road is jointly owned by myself and him. It is a private road, and that the stipulation is that they cannot use that other road coming in there as an access to this, because that would be coming down a private road for whatever. That's concern number one. The other question I have for the people is that my property has an access water access that goes up the side of it. There's a road that's straight up, pretty much that road that we're talking about. It's a private road. It does have, with Old Bridge Inc., the old Bridge Inc., allows access from the water line that's goes across my property down towards Chinook Bridge and comes up along and does take a line that's there on that drawing, shows a 30-foot easement. The easement that I have, or the Old Bridge Inc. had on that, it is not that wide. It's only 15 feet wide. If they put the pipe, water going up there, it would have to be returned to the same condition it is in, which is a semi-paved road. Okay, so that would be a concern of mine for this, where they actually believe that they have the best access of the water to their property. I would highly suggest, okay, if you look at the topography there, that should make a connection someplace closer to this property, because of just going around the corner, coming around and going around the corner instead of just going straight up from someplace. But that's not a legal concern that I can have. It's just my own thought on it. So I believe those are the two things, my two concerns about what they are doing. Other than that, I very much welcome them to the neighborhood. They have a beautiful site. If you've ever been up there at the top of the hill, it's a beautiful view, and they are, hopefully we'll enjoy that forever.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Ann Ferguson, 645 Kings Mill Road, Danville, Kentucky. I'm here tonight to ask the Board of Adjustments to maintain the integrity of our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is Kings Mill Road and Chenault Bridge Road. If you can look on your map, you can see where Chenault Bridge Road comes down this way and around to the Chenault Bridge and then out Kings Mill Road. We have worked in our neighborhood to make it a good, clean, safe place to live. And we want to continue in that vein. I was surprised today when I learned that the person who will be pastoring this church is Grant Hardwick. He's my neighbor. His address is Lexington Road, but he lives in that area, the Chenault Bridge, Kings Mill Road area. Surprised because we only heard about this, maybe the church about a day ago. I think he pastored in Lancaster up until just a few months ago. And now he is establishing another church in Boyle County. I have a list of concerns about this proposal. Major concern is the cut into 34 from this property. Those of us who drive up that curved road to 34 as an exit from our neighborhood, we stop at the stop sign and we look all the way back to Old Bridge to determine when it is safe to make that left turn. Now, if they are successful in putting a cut right in the middle of that distance, we are going to have a much more difficult time coming out of Chenault Bridge. It's bad enough now. There is a lot of traffic on 34. The cars are running at 55 miles an hour minimum. Minimum, let me say. You all are familiar with that area. The cut is too close to the Chenault Bridge exit. Way too close. Another concern is that if a church is erected there, that property will be removed from the tax rolls. And that has happened in Boyle County many times lately. And the powers that be need to be paying attention. I would even say the city of Danville should be paying attention to the property that they are removing from the tax rolls. This property was subdivided, I believe, last month. I believe it was last month at Planning and Zoning, and Alex Milburn at that time indicated that they would be coming down that road across from Old Bridge and using an easement across his property. That's the way it came through Planning and Zoning on the subdivision. Now that's changed and they've redesigned that so they have marked an exit onto 34. They have 7 acres, as you can see here, that the church is located in the far northwest corner of the property. Maybe that might be an acre. 6 more acres? What goes on those 6 acres? A school? A baseball diamond? A stadium? A dining area? Nursing home? Who knows? But he has 6 more acres to maneuver with, and we have no idea what their plans are.
And apparently not notified of changes of plans.
What's that?
Apparently not
If
notified.
they were to do anything else, they would have to come back.
They would
before
have to come
committee.
back?
So in my opinion, that's really not on the table to discuss tonight because that's not part of their plan that we're approving tonight.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Southland Christian Church over on Harrodsburg Road uses off-duty law enforcement to direct the traffic during their services. The off-duty law enforcement on Saturday evening and Sunday morning stops traffic on Harrodsburg Road and on Brannon Road so that the churchgoers can move in and out and the travelers can stand still. That would certainly be a challenge. Coming to you for a conditional use permit, the applicant has circumvented the comp plan and the future land use map. We'd like to know, how does this proposed church fit into the comprehensive plan? And what is the direction from a future land use map for this property? Today, I called District 7 to inquire about the cut, and I talked to Mr. Lester. He knew nothing about a proposed cut on 34. He very kindly gave me the name, our number for the office in Lexington. So I called the district office in Lexington. I left my name and number with the woman receptionist. I haven't heard back. They did not seem to know anything about this cut, but they have procured a cut by going to the State Department of Transportation, not through the local district.
Ms. Ferguson, we're gonna need to start wrapping it up.
Pardon?
We need to start
Right.
wrapping it up.
I believe that one other person asked the question about would there be outreach programs. I think you answered that question when you said they would have to come back if they established other.
I don't think their programming is the same as a school or a nursing home.
A building for,
A building, they would have to come back.
a building for any kind of outreach program. So, we're asking you, in your wisdom, please consider denying this request. If you cannot, in good conscience, deny that request, would you consider tabling it until we, neighbors, and you, Board of Adjustments, could do a little more research into the consequences of this procedure? Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles Ferguson, 645 Kings Mill Road, Danville. I promised to tell the truth, tell the truth. I only want to magnify my feelings. I got no problem with the church. I don't want to cut in 34 right there, just down from where we try to come on the road every time. And I don't want 25 or 50 cars coming out of there. Every time the church meets, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday night, whatever. I'm going to have a stream of cars coming out of there, and we've got all that traffic going 55 miles an hour, minimum, as she says. And we have to wait a lot of times trying to come out of the bridge road onto 34. It's not unusual for us to wait 2 or 3 minutes till we get enough clearance that we feel safe to make a left to go to town. Now you're going to add that to it, and so the only thing I got to say is I don't want that cut there. I don't want it. Thank you much, and deny it if you can.
Thank you.
Philip Johnson. I live at 4499 Chenault Bridge Road. So and I promise to tell the truth in my opinions today. Our property shares their entire western property line. And I really don't have any concern with the church per se, but my concern is about the process of we're not going to be notified of final site plans. And I have seen runoff from that lot. And during heavy rains, our pastures take a lot of water. So there's an existing tree line there that if removed is going to make that worse and could be erosion issues. I want to know that someone has looked into that and that I'm not going to experience any consequence after the fact, because after the fact, there's nothing hardly that can be done about it. So the other concern is we have animals that are in our pastures that are currently next to an agricultural property. That's pretty much no risk for me because there's only going to be other animals, or currently, since we've lived there, they've only taken hay. But if you turn it into a church, I mean, it's kind of a public use. Now I've got to worry about risk to our animals or people along our property line. So I don't know if this can even come with any kind of vegetation requirement like the other, zoning matters do, but my concerns is over removal of the tree line and water runoff and the lack of any real process for the neighbors to know what the final site plan is going to be. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there any plan of removing that tree line? Okay. Michaela, is there any way that these people can maybe write a letter to the planning commission ahead of time?
They can write it to me, but that's what I'm trying to explain is that it's just not going to go through the planning commission board.
Okay.
It's an in-house review because it's under 10,000 square feet. So that's why there's no notification of it. It doesn't meet our threshold.
But the standard for water runoff is that this project cannot increase the runoff onto other properties beyond what it
Yes,
currently
yes.
is.
It still has to meet all of our requirements within the zoning ordinance. It's gonna have to meet all of our drainage requirements, et cetera. It still goes through that same thorough process. It still has to check all those boxes. It just doesn't go through that public hearing process. It's done as an administrative review.
And Ms.
I review it, and then it's certified by their engineer. Yeah.
Mr. Stevens, is it feasible to believe that with a water retention plan, it would maybe decrease the runoff that's already there?
So, yeah, if you don't mind, I can address that concern and others.
Please.
She's correct that we have to comply with the stormwater ordinance, which, in a nutshell, says that your post-construction runoff after you pave, after you add buildings, is below or equal to the existing runoff, peak flow runoff that leaves the site during several different design storms. It sounds like there may already be stormwater issues out there. It makes sense, being close to the lake, that, there's going to be quite a bit of runoff the closer you get to a large body of water like a lake. I can't promise that we're going to make significant improvements to others' runoff issues. However, what we can promise is that our runoff will not impact them any more than what's there now. We will mitigate our runoff by installing a detention pond. I don't know exactly where it will go just yet because we haven't got that far in our design process, but being at the top of the hill, I could see that it may be possible for a detention pond to be between the building site and the highway, thus outletting our water into the ditch line as opposed to off the back. If that's doable, I think that's a reasonable place to put it, just to possibly reduce, any potential impact of even having a discharge rolling off the back. If it does roll off the back, it will still meet the stormwater requirements by mitigating the peak flow. And when we say pond, it's not a wet pond, it's a dry detention pond that only holds water during this kind of storms you all were talking about, a 2 to 4 inch rainfall event. Does that kind of explain our process?
That answers my question.
Okay. And I just want to reiterate on the entrance, we go through the KYTC District 7 office. Robert Baker is the permits engineer. If you want to talk to him, he's who reviewed our plan. They're busy. It takes a day or two for him to call me back too, so I can relate to that issue. But in designing our entrance, we're engineers. We're licensed by the state. We have to uphold professional standards. That goes for the detention pond as well. So we don't do these things lightly, and we use standards and our education and experience to do these things in a responsible manner. This entrance was approved. It's about 1,700 feet from Chenault Bridge Road, which far exceeds what they typically want for separation. And I just want to keep in perspective that, like you said, we're only going to be approved for the use that we're asking for tonight, which is a 2,400 square foot building. I understand that they average about 70 attendees to their church meetings. And so, yes, there is a sporadic impact with churches. They meet, and it's not spread throughout the day like a Dollar General store. It's concentrated, but this is a small church. And as far as comp plan, future land use map, as far as I know, that is future land use commercial, or agricultural, I'm sorry. However, I think Mr. Smith might be able to attest to this, that conditional use permit for religious uses is a typical, it's something that's requested on agricultural parcels, and it's something that's specifically carved out, something you can ask for as a religious institution.
You have to have conditional use permits as specifically listed in the zoning ordinance. And our zoning ordinance does list church uses for the agricultural zone.
Mm-hmm. And I would argue that a small church, Grace Community Baptist Church, that community churches are part and parcel of Boyle County. Having small churches throughout the county is very much historically in line with the county. I don't think it's really outside of the realm of something that is already in many places in the county. So let's see, I was trying to take notes on some of the other concerns. I think that's the bulk of it, but if you guys have any other questions, happy to help.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Just go to the mic, sorry.
So earlier, a comment was made that a conditional use permit is not transferable. What
Correct.
happens if they outgrow the property and it was to be sold to someone else?
It would have to come here to be another church. Is
So,
that correct?
That's correct.
Or, yeah, or anything other than agriculture.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's only if somebody purchased it and wanted to use it as a church, they would have to come back before the board to get an approved CUP, because they might be using it differently than what they're proposing here, so that's the intent of it.
Okay, is there anybody else's? And you're gonna have to be quick.
I'll be
You've
real
already had
quick.
one chance.
I'll be real
So-
quick.
Okay.
Okay, the 3 white buildings, that's Jim's property. The little squiggle line that goes right in front of Chenault Bridge, that's my driveway.
Right here?
Nope.
Oh, sorry, right here?
Those are the 3 barns.
Okay,
That's Jim's property. The squiggle line going to the right, that's me.
okay.
If you dump the water out 34, there's a gully that comes down from the golf course that comes right down beside me, and you will wash me out. Do you promise? We're not going to have any other chance to say anything. Do you promise that it will be as it is now, if not better, on the water runoff? And will you work with the neighbors, and I'll give you my card?
Ma'am, I don't think we need to make him promise. He's an engineer. This will be designed and done appropriately.
Our stormwater ordinance is fairly lengthy. It has those requirements. Whatever runoff they're creating from what they're proposing to build on this
Right.
site has to be mitigated on this site. So that's why they'll build that detention basin. And so if you get a big rainfall event, all that runoff is going to go and sit in that basin. And then after the rain stops, they'll slowly release it
Okay.
over time,
And
so.
who do we call if it doesn't? If we're worse
Um,
off? Exactly.
Call me, I guess.
That's why I want him to tell me.
Okay, well, you're here
Because
to
you guys
address us,
can't.
not the applicant.
Yep.
Is-
Pastor, will you work with the neighbors
Ma'am,
to let us know
ma'am.
what's happening?
I'll just say this, we will do all we can do to keep everybody happy. If we throw, I wouldn't blame you, I would keep the vegetation up there myself. And I don't think we have any desire but to be fine with the can and make sure we don't cause
Yeah. And I'm not trying to make plans not available to the public. They are always available to the public. You can call at any time. I'm happy to email them as soon as possible. It's just, we're a small staff. It's just the two of us. We can't possibly keep up with trying to remember to email out all these, as we're checking in and going through this process. So you're welcome to call us as often as you want for these plans.
I think your point's been well made. Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak? Yes, ma'am. I don't know that that's relevant to tonight. I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting now, and the board will deliberate.
Ready to make a motion to accept.
Okay. We have a motion to grant the conditional use. Is there a second?
Can I just interject for a second? I would say you might want to consider looking, the parking area, they were talking about reconfiguring it. I need some direction if you all want me to bring that back before you or not. I think the use wouldn't change. I think they're still proposing the 2,400 square foot. It sounds like they might go up to 40 spaces at most. Is that something that you want me to bring back before you with this being a preliminary plan, or are you comfortable with it as is?
Yes, do we need a motion to accept and let her bring it back?
If there's more than 35 parking spaces, it'll come back before us.
Okay, that works.
It's, well,
If it changes, it
asking.
needs to come back to the.
yeah. If it-
Okay, so if they reconfigure, but it's 35, it's okay, but if it goes over 35, I'll bring it back? Yes,
I'm good with
okay.
that.
Okay, my motion to accept that it does meet all 4 requirements, and I'll ask Henry for anything further.
Board finds that this proposal is a low-intensity use that will not disrupt the character of the vicinity. In furtherance of this idea of a limited scope, the applicant has agreed to the number of parking spaces set forth in their application and the building size set forth in their application. And that's a condition upon approval.
That would be my,
Is there a second?
that's what you said? That's what I was gonna say.
There's a motion made and seconded. Is there further discussion?
Do you have a question?
Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. And motion carries unanimously, so the conditional use is granted. Is there any, that concludes our hearings for tonight. Is there any old business?
No,
Is there any new business?
no.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A motion in several seconds. All in favor?